day one of learning how to make a first-person shooter over the span of a couple weeks, because if I don't work while my hand's fractured, I'm going to lose my mind. What am I actually trying to make? I'm trying to make a really twitchy, fast-paced first-person shooter, something I'd actually want to play just when I'm bored. Going to be high-score based, satisfying movement, satisfying weapons. We want to reward good aim, fast reaction times, just going really fast. I don't want to make some 50-hour game. This is just going to be like a passion project for myself, so I don't go crazy over the next few weeks while I can't work. I'm making it in Godot because I just like the node system a lot. Unity seems like fine, but just as a company they kind of suck, and I've already worked more in Godot. This video is not going to get super granular into how the code works. I'll show snippets of it. Obviously, like, you can pause and look around if you want to see any of it, but I want it to be understandable even if you don't program or make games. For day one of this work, I had a couple goals in mind to lay a useful foundation that I can work on for the rest of it. I needed to set up a easily tweakable player movement script, which is just like the code for how the player moves, so that way in the future I can get it just dialed exactly how I want. It's not going to be perfect today, but as long as it can be made perfect, that's what I want. Then I need to set up a system so that the game recognizes when the player shoots and when that shot hits something, because that's going to be important for playing gun animations, for detecting hits on enemies, for pretty much building the rest of the entire game around. We need to have movement that can feel good eventually, and shooting that gets detected by the game. Start making anything we need a playground to run around in. Started with some geometry laid out and some targets so that we can eventually test the shooting functionality. It took me a little bit, but it gave me good practice working with my hand. I figured out that I can use right click as left click and hold my mouse at kind of a 45-degree angle, and it works out. So recently I've been playing a lot of Counter-Strike and thinking about what makes that game feel so good to play most of the time. You press the key and your character builds up their momentum over some time, and it kind of just gives like a weightier feel to it. It feels nice. So games like Overwatch use this kind of velocity system where you can tap AD, and your character will kind of jiggle back and forth. And then Counter-Strike, you press the key and your character accelerates and then they decelerate, and this is the kind of movement I want in my game. Like a faster paced feel of it. But this movement does require a lot of calibration, otherwise it kind of feels like you're just skating along ice. It just doesn't feel quite right. There are a lot of amazing Godot tutorials out there, especially for character controllers, but most of them use a velocity-based system, which is just not what I'm trying to go for. But thankfully, one of them actually had a deceleration-based system to add inertia when slowing down. Thank you Legion Games and his juiced up first-person character controller for this. But we can use the ideas laid out in his video and use lerp functions to smooth out the acceleration and deceleration of the player depending on a bunch of different circumstances. So if they're in the air, if they're on the ground, if they're pressing a key, if they're not pressing a key, we want these different acceleration and deceleration values, and fine-tuning them will make the movement feel perfect. And while it might not be totally realistic to let the player accelerate and decelerate a little bit in the air, it feels nice to be able to do as a player, and especially in a fast-paced, sliding around, lots of jumping, it's going to be essential that players can make jumps that micro-adjust in the air. Tomorrow, for day 2, I'm going to spend some time dialing that in. Right now, though, it's still pretty fun to just run and slide around. I also added a slide. Once the tweakable player movement script was made, it was time to set up signals to communicate with the rest of the game when the player shoots their weapon and when that weapon actually hits something. To test if the gun could recognize when the player was shooting for now, I just added a little small muzzle segment at the end that just lights up when the click is registered. Getting these signals set up and remembering how to use them was as simple as staring at the documentation for a while. And then we check for the player inputs every frame to see if they're pressing the fire button, and if they are, then we send that signal to the rest of the game that, hey, the player is shooting, we need everything else to do stuff in accordance to this. So one of those things is checking if the player is looking at a target, if they're actively aiming at it, and if they are, we need to tell that target that, hey, the player shot, they hit you, you need to do something in accordance to that. In this case, just a counter that counts up to let me know that other things recognize that the player is shooting. This can be done by just calling a hit method on the target, which we can write specifically for each different enemy or whatever we're shooting, so that this system can just be expanded and used for whatever, but the bones of it right now are here. And it still takes some imagination at this stage, but we're laying down the groundwork. Now with the tweakable player script made and the game detecting if hits were made, it was time to start thinking about what enemies might look like and levels could look like, so I can start really fine-tuning things and get it feeling perfect. So follow for day 2.